Kojo, 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 Kojo.
A very warm welcome to everyone. Namaskar. So, if there was ever a subject that has been fraught with controversy in our country, it has been the subject which is Aryan invasion. Now, as it has already been explained to you, the Aryan invasion is about multiple lines of argumentation, primarily stemming maybe from a linguistic point of view, supported originally by archaeology or supported in courts, should I say. And in the last, maybe if Dr. Rai can correct me, maybe in the last 2 decades, genetics has come in a huge way. When I say genetics, I mean population genetics and movement of people. So I want to keep myself to be the least possible time ka speaker. So I guess I'll come first to Dr. Rai. Dr. Rai, maybe we can start over here, and if you could explain to everyone what role does genetics have to play in this entire discussion on the Aryan? Like some people want to call it the Aryan invasion. Now somebody says no, it's not the invasion. Now it's a migration. So semantics aside, everybody knows what we are talking about. So maybe we can start, and if you could tell us what role does genetics have to play?
Thanks, Kushal. Genetics is a very interesting discipline, and in India, genetics has taken very important role to understand our history, migrations, admixtures event, not only human but other animals also. It's as I said, it's very diverse discipline, and to understand a complex country like India, genetics has very important role. As you said, Aryan Invasion Theory, to rule out or to support it, genetics has very important role. So we are using genetical informations from modern day population groups all across the country. And at the same time, we are using cutting edge ancient DNA technology to retrieve genetic informations from the deads who are no more, like who have passed away 100, 200 generations before present. Um, we have analyzed vast number of samples all across northwest of India. We have DNA data from all across the country. Now we are like more strong in terms of our data. We did careful examinations of all the genetic resources and data, and then like our publications and our works are being published day by day. So as you said, Aryan invasion, if invasion is taking place, that means like it should contribute a lot of genetic components to the
Yes.
present population's scenario. And if somebody is coming in that masses, they will also leave lot of impressions about their cultures, about their artifacts, about their knowledge systems, languages. We did not find any cultural assemblies so far from Central Asia or from the Pontic steppe regions that time all across the country. So if somebody is coming and invading India, they should have come with a lot of their knowledge and cultural artifacts. And genetically also we have ruled out, like so far we have ruled out that there are no step integrations or no Central Asians ancestry which is arriving to South Asia much earlier than 1000 before Christ or 3000 years before present. So it was claimed that that ancestry or that invasion would have taken place in 15th, 16th century BC. So that is completely false in terms of genetic evidences and the new data sets.
But then maybe I could bring Dr. Elst over here. Dr. Elst, as Dr. Rai has said that when it comes to the genetic evidence, we don't find it beyond 3,000 years. But then there is a very specific date that is given to the Rig Veda. It was literally gotten, I mean, you could explain it better, but from what I know is that Max Muller had a way to calculate it. He picked a baseline and then he went 100 years, 100 years, 100 years, 100 years. And then he said, okay, 1500 BCE is the tentative date for the Rig Veda. And then on the basis of that, they came up with what is famously known as the Proto-Indo-European language hypothesis. So what is the linguistic case? Maybe if you could start by presenting the case for the Aryan invasion to explain to people, and then you can maybe inform us about what are the problems that case has.
Well, to start at the beginning, in 1767, the French Jesuit Gaston Laurent Coeur, who lived in Andhra Pradesh, sent a paper to the Academy in Paris showing the link between Latin, Greek, and Sanskrit. That's the start of the Indo-European language family. The very first one to go public with this was the French leading freethinker Voltaire. In fact, we might call him a Charvaka, if that sounds familiar to you. And so he said, the essence of European culture finds its origin on the banks of the Ganga. So the out of India theory was not started in 1990 by the ugly, vicious, disgusting Hindu nationalists. No, it was started by the cream, the top layer of European Enlightenment intellectuals. It was taken over by Immanuel Kant, by Johann Herder, by Jules Michelet, by Friedrich Schlegel, and so on. So this was the dominant theory for about 60 years. Then from 1830 it starts to change. This was for an innocent reason, namely linguistically they found that perhaps there was a distance between this reconstructed Proto-Indo-European, of which they didn't know yet very much, and Sanskrit. And from this they deduced, not quite logically, that there must have been a geographical distance between the homeland and India. And so in 1834, August Schlegel, the brother of the earlier mentioned Friedrich Schlegel, proposed the Caucasus area as the homeland. And so ever since, it has been changing a little bit, but it stays close to the Caucasus. So now it is the Volga, Don area in Russia, Ukraine. That's now the favorite. That's what we're up against, in fact. And so in the mid-19th century, the whole thing shifts. One of the last people to actually defend the out of India theory. So at that time already there was a debate between Aryan invasion and out of India theory. The last person to defend it was a colonialist par excellence, but who was also, like William Jones, like Gaston Laurent Coeur, an European living in India, which is important because those people understood the importance and the magnitude of India, which was very much minimized and belittled by people living in Europe. So they could easily ignore India, whereas people living in India couldn't. And so Mount Stuart Elphinstone argues, and it is still argued, that none of the Vedic literature contains any hint at all of a homeland outside India. And so he uses that as an argument. He's perfectly right. Nobody has ever been able to refute it. Nevertheless, there were two other factors that then were sort of the nail in the coffin of the out of India theory. So one was linguistic paleontology. This means that you can recognize the environment of an ancient language where that was spoken by the vocabulary it has. For instance, Indo-European does not have a word for giraffe or for kangaroo or so, but it does have words for European animals and also, as will be shown later, for North Indian animals, like the elephant, as Sri Kantalagiri has shown, is also part of it. There are no elephants in Europe. That's very much a pointer to India. But so what they said at that time, there were words for wolf, for bear, for birch tree, and these seem to suggest a cold climate. That's not entirely accurate because India too has wolves, has bears. In Kashmir it even has birch trees. So, you know, we just have to accept it's a historical fact that Europeans at that time thought and genuinely thought, oh, this points to Europe. So at that time, it became hard to believe India was the homeland. A second factor is the racial factor. Mid-19th century is the the rise of the racial thinking. Like the British Prime Minister Benjamin Disraeli said, everything in history is explained by race. So if you see a new cultural element arising, it's because of the immigration of a new race, all right? And so the first Veda translations appeared, and there they systematically interpreted everything as if it points to white, dynamic invaders conquering the country of the dark aboriginals. Like in the Battle of the Ten Kings, systematically there is, for instance, a reference to the Vedic seer Vasishta as being white-clad, Shvitniya. This was translated as white-complexioned. And their enemies are described as the Visha Asikni, literally translated as the black tribe. So that seems to be like a very clear description of a racial war between white invaders and black natives. Now, that's not the meaning. The Asikni is the name of a river, which is the Chenab in West Punjab. And so it means the people from the Asikni, which is exactly what is said about the enemies, that they come from the Asikni River. And the battle takes place on the next river, the Parushni or present-day Ravi River. And so, because of these mistranslations, the impression was created that, you can argue all you want that there is no testimony of a foreign homeland, but if they themselves are saying, oh, but we're fighting against the dark aboriginals, then it becomes pointless to deny the Aryan invasion theory. So, for relatively sound, rather innocent, but consequential reasons, the Aryan invasion theory won through. Mind you, it was not the original theory. It came only after 60, 70 years. But from then on, it was the theory. And so the next thing to decide was, okay, when did this invasion of India happen? And that's when Max Müller makes a rather random guess that it is about 1500 BC. And so among specialists, a few told him, well, this is not based on anything. And so he, after a while, admitted, this is purely a guess. Actually, we'll never know. But by then, you see, with his big authority, his big prestige, everybody had already swallowed this 1500 BC. Until today, that has never been questioned. Now, one consequence, and here genetics comes in, is that when David Reich from Harvard 5 years ago showed, or at least argued, that there was an influx of people into India in about 1700 BC, that was applauded by people like Tony Joseph in India as proving the Aryan invasion theory. In reality, that totally hinges on the chronology of Max Müller, saying that this invasion took place in the mid-second millennium BC. In reality, and I'll stop here, but in reality, it doesn't show that. You see, people may have come in, as the Scythians and the Greeks and the Huns and so on have also done. But they were not the Aryans. They were not the bringers of Sanskrit. Why not? Well, because Sanskrit was in India. The Rig Veda dates all the way back to like 3000 BC. And so whoever came in, they were too late to be the Aryan invaders. So the Aryan invasion theory has not been proven genetically.
All right, Dr. Rai, in fact, this is the crux of the issue, the date of the Rig Veda and the Reich lab and the input of what they now call the step DNA, or I don't know, R1A1, jisko kehte hain. But the problem here, I also want to ask you this question. Like I said in the beginning, this hypothesis, I don't even like to call it a theory. I think it should be called a hypothesis, whatever it is. It's not a theory. I think you are a scientist. In a scientific method, a theory, the word theory is used after a lot more evidence. This is what it is. It is a hypothesis at best. Now, this hypothesis hinges a lot on this 1500 BCE date that Dr. Elst mentioned. And another thing that is used and weaponized in India is on oh, we are different people. So now I just want to ask you from the horse's mouth, are we different people genetically?
Yeah, genetically South Asians are different. No doubt, we have a lot of differences. Among the audience, I think we have diversity 4 5 times more than entire European diversity. So we are highly diverse groups. We are diverse in food, lifestyle, languages, and genetically also we are very diverse. As he said that Max Muller himself was not sure that whether this Aryan invasion theory was really taken place in 15th century BC. Genetically, we are not finding any evidence of West Eurasian admixtures until 500 BC. So I told you about 1000 BC that is our lower boundary. That signature we are finding on the basis of modern DNA evidences. So we have tested lot of permutations and combinations and lot of probable events. We did lot of modeling. So the minimum age goes to 1000 BC, but most of the ancestry that is arriving after 500 BC. So like Scythians, Huns, Kushans, like they have been continuously coming to India. We have lot of examples like Jews. Jews, they have come in 8th century AD to Kerala, and they have settled down and they have admixture to the local populations. Now, if you go back to their ancestry, you won't find any differences. You will just find like 2 to 3% of their Middle Eastern ancestry, which is consistent in the local populations. Like Parsis. Parsis landed to Gujarat in 7th, 8th century AD, and they have mixed to the local populations. Now Parsis are highly endogamous group. But as soon as they came, they landed here, they have mixed with the local populations, they have been assimilated with the local populations, and now they are like they are highly endogamic group. So to understand the genetic components that is coming from the like West Eurasias, we have to do a lot of modelings because different populations behave differently. If you are working on South Indian populations groups, their genetic analysis we have to do a lot of other modeling that model doesn't fit with the North Indian populations. For example, we are working in Kashmir Valley. In Kashmir, we are not finding any West Eurasian ancestry that is going back to 500 BC. But Kashmir is very close to Swat Valley, Iran, and then that was a route of long-time trading. So we expect more steppe ancestry in Kashmir Valley, but we are not finding until 500 BC. So, like Aryan invasion theory itself is a controversial subject. I have discussed this issue with many scholars all over the world. No one believes this theory, and still we are talking and we are debating this issue and we are debunking this hypothesis.
But it's taught in India in our school textbooks.
But who started? I think it's all is bogus. We should not discuss about Aryan invasion theory at this platform, because this has already been disproven linguistically. This has been proven genetically, and nothing much left to discuss about this issue. We can discuss about the chronology of Rig Vedas. This still is a debatable topic. We don't have much data to date the chronology of Rig Veda. We have to discuss about our linguistic affiliations, about Austroasiatic languages, Indo-European languages, Proto-Indo-European languages, their timings. But Aryan invasion theory is already debunked genetically and linguistically.
Another question I had, from an archaeological perspective, when you talk about an invasion, every time there is an invasion, the archaeological record will show it in the form of change in, let's say, the grey ware or recorded ware culture. Let's say X culture has a type of pottery, and when they invade a nation, they bring their technology with them. So the first part is, does archaeology show any change in the cultural spike, or it's just gradual in over the years, we've just changed in technology? Second, if there is an invasion, does archaeology show any kind of mass graves? Because it's literally called an invasion. So what happens during an invasion? People
Yes.
die and they fight. So are there, like, these are my two questions to you before I go to Dr. Elst.
So far in Indian context, we did not find any cultural assemblage that is coming from so-called Aryan land. So far, we did not find any cultural assemblage. instead we are finding a lot of cultural assemblies and lot of burials which can make a very good case of out of India theory. You know, there are a few sites in Iran and Turkmenistan. Their burials are reported, and those burials are genetically linked to the Harappans. And it dates back to 5,200 to 5,500 years before present. So we have clear-cut example of out of India migration theory, but so far we have not found any archaeological assemblies or any cultural material that links to the West Eurasian component to the Indian context. Coming back to potteries, like potteries has a lot of transformations. Different ages had different pottery tribes. In India, like for Ganga plain, if you go back to Mahabharata time period, that pottery that we call painted grey culture potteries. We have OCP cultures that is very predominant in this Yamuna Doab regions. And then we have Indus-specific exclusive pottery that you find in mature and late Harappan context. That is widespread in Haryana, Punjab, Gujarat. So we have pottery continuity until megalithic time period, but so far we have not found any West Eurasian pottery or any cultural artifacts in Indian context. And our this R1A1 work, like on the basis of very small number of sample sets, few research article came in late 90s and early 2000 that has make a case of Indo-European language family expansion, and the sample size was surprisingly 100, and that paper talked about the entire Indian populations that also includes Sri Lanka. Now we have tremendous amount of samples, and we have thousands of data we have generated so far, and that on the basis of R1A1, they have proven the scholars, European scholars, they have proven that R1A1 might have been originated in Europe, and then that might have come to South Asia with the languages. Now we have 50 times more data, and then our data shows that R1A1 diversity is 4 to 5 times more diverse than the entire Europe. So that also another set of data that we are going to use, not to debunk the Aryan Invasion Theory, because being a scientist, my job is to not to debunk the Aryan Invasion Theory. My work is to understand the deep population history of South Asians and how population moves and how they admix, and what are the consequences of that migrations, how that helps to understand our genetic makeup, and that has a lot of implication to understand the genetic burdens, disease burdens in the populations. So, but my data has a lot of implications to also disprove and prove few hypotheses that was given long back, and that's still persisting in the current scenario.
Fair enough. Dr. Elst, now on genetics, the standard confusion lays, I'll start with an example. Buddhism has clearly spread from India as an idea, as a set of ideas, or a memeplex outside India, and it has gone to various parts of the world. But we can clearly not see a significant genetic spike to, let's say, make it a comparable analysis. Why is it that when it comes to the so-called Aryan invasion or migration hypothesis, why is it that even if I would take it on face value that there was a genetic migration into India and these people came into India, so it's natural that they were the ones who got the Proto-Indo-European language family into India?
Well, there are a few genetic data that indicate the out of India scenario, like this R1A1 spread from India rather than into India. Then there is the evidence of non-human species that has been worked out by Premendra Priyadarshi to give the most salient example. The cattle, you see, no Western cattle has been brought into India. which is strange because the Aryans are supposed to have been cattle raisers.
Nomadic pastoralists.
Yes, and so they came into India without their cattle, which is quite bizarre. Whereas their cattle somehow went the other way, because what we find is that the zebu cattle has left genetic traces in the cows all the way in Ukraine and in Syria and as far as Italy. So clearly, these cows have gone all the way there. Now, cows don't go out of their own volition across mountain passes like the Khyber Pass. Cows live in the plains in a very pleasant climate with a heavy soil and so on. They don't go into the mountains unless human beings drive them to. You see, they're faced with the problem that an invasion would have left more archaeological signs. So they say, yeah, they came in under the radar, unseen, but somehow they still managed to completely change India. Well, yeah, it's a weakness bit, I don't think it is correct. But so that's how they try to save themselves. But so the important thing is that in linguistic circles also, they realize that the present status quo is weak and has to be revised.
So just because we have to hop onto the Q&A too, just one quick comment from both of you. What about the horse?
In India, we have horses since 30 million years before present. Yeah, we have horse fossils in India. So horse were here every time. We had pony horses. So you were talking about Arabian horse, a Central Asian horse.
Exactly. A very specific horse is used to make the case that you don't find the horse.
No, horses are everywhere. Horses were found in Mohenjo-daro, Kalibanga, then Sarakota. There are plenty of horses remains. So, I think there's no question of horse. Horses were always in India. So, in fact, we use pony horses. They were short in height. And, we had a lot of horse-driven chariots and decorated chariots that time.
But we just found a chariot in Sinoli now. But
that dates back to 2100 BC. And that is for sure horse-driven chariot.
So did the Aryans send it by courier?
No, but they were very much present in Central Asia. And so while exporting things, they may also have imported a horse or two once in a while. So there were these ponies, these native horses along the Narmada River. There was also an import of horses from Central Asia where you had strong, good horses, So they were very prized among the elites in Harappa. I was just at the Archaeological Harappa conference in Gandhinagar. So I learned there the new state of the art about these horses. So some specialists enumerated, I think, 12 cities in Harappa where horses were found. So the story that you still hear that there were no horses in Harappa, that's completely outdated now. So there certainly were horses. As for the Sinoli chariot, it confirms the chronology of the Rig Veda. Why? Because you have mention of horses early on in the Rig Veda, but it's only in the 10th book that you have mention of horse-drawn chariots. So carts, wagons, drawn by oxen, they exist already for a long time. Since the Indo-European starting period, which is why in all the Indo-European languages, you have the same native word for 6 parts of the cart, and for the car itself, the wheel, the axle, and so on. So they clearly already had wagon technology, which was unique in the world at that time. But so the horse-drawn chariot that developed, that's a big technological development. So that comes only in the 10th book, totally at the end of the Rig Veda, which is dated by archaeology also to about 2000 BC, which corresponds to other archaeological evidence, like the desiccation of the Saraswati River, 1900 BC. So that's about the end of the Rig Veda, but it took more than 1,000 years to compose the Rig Veda. So it starts in about 3300 BC. And so, you see, that chronology, I reiterate, is really fatal to Max Muller's scenario of an Aryan invasion.
All right. All right, if there are any audience questions, we can go forward and take. If there are any, we have someone. Can somebody go with the mic? And please make sure your questions are short and precise so that more people get the opportunity.
Sure. Hi, my name is Deve. Hi, my name is Deve Singh Rathore, and my question is regarding the 2015 excavation at Rakhigadi. Like there were some skeletons discovered which didn't have any steppe ancestry, but they had some Irula tribe ancestry from what I read. So, like I read both perspectives, one saying it confirmed the Aryan Invasion Theory and one rejecting it. So could you just explain a little bit more on that, like shortly, if that's possible?
Yeah, thanks for your question. That Rakhigadi data has a lot of genetic affinity with not only Yerula tribe, but all other tribes of Tamil Nadu. And that Harappan ancestry is the largest carry forward ancestry in modern day Indians. So, Sri Lankan, Vedda tribes and Sinhalese, they also carry Harappan ancestry. That is on basis of only one sample data. But the proportion of that ancestry varies. But all Indians has that Harappan ancestry. And what was the second question?
No, so I guess the question was that they make a for and against case. So where does the truth lie, right?
Well, in this case, the Aryan invasion viewpoint, and it has been expressed in personal correspondence by Martin Kümmel, who is one of the great Indo-Europeanists at the moment from Germany. You see, whatever this evidence says about the intra-Indian relation between populations in Tamil Nadu and in Harappa and so on. So it's very interesting for Indian population history, but it says nothing about the Aryan invasion theory, because the Aryan invasion theory itself presupposes that the Harappan people are not from Central Asia. They are precisely supplemented or even replaced by Aryan invaders later.
All right.
Yeah, and that ancestry also shows that agriculture in India was indigenous. Before that, it was hypothesized that agriculture might have brought from Anatolia or fertile descent. But now we have archaeological and archaeobotanical evidences that confirms that in agriculture was indigenous, and that Rakhigadi ancestry does not share any ancestry with populations from Anatolia or fertile descent. In fact, the ancestry of Rakhigadi individual was separated to ancestors of Iranian hunter-gatherers about 12,000 years ago. So since 12,000 years ago to 5,000 years ago, Harappans did not contact or did not interacted with population found in Anatolia or fertile descent that time. So whatever the agriculture system was developed and innovated, that was indigenous. Now we have also barley and wheat evidences that is going back to 5,000 years before present. So day by day, this chronology is we are pushing back not we are pushing, the data is pushing back the chronology.
Hello. Sir, as we just heard, it's clear that, the entire panel is clear that the whole debate around Aryan invasion is more of a myth or, as you said, hypothesis. But how come is it that it's still, lingering? So is it, are we the one who are lingering it, or is it, the other side? And when would we see an end to this, whole fabricated debate around Aryan invasion? When there is so much, consensus that's just, bogus theory.
Well, I don't think there is so much consensus. You see, in the West, still the, East European homeland theory is still dominant, and they justify that on linguistic grounds, though, of course, the case in archaeology is much more difficult to make for them. But then they take heart from developments in genetics, where they don't see the Indian findings showing an emigration from India, and very much count on David Reich's findings of an influx into India. So at least they see sufficient reason to hold on to a homeland outside India, which necessitates an invasion into India. However, this is purely a scholarly thing, and because the political use of the Aryan theory existed in Europe, for British colonialism, it justified the colonization of India, and in National Socialism, where the Aryan Invasion Theory was the perfect illustration of their whole racial worldview. However, after 1945, it became obsolete. And so today, after several generations have passed that are not brought up in this racial view anymore, most Western scholars wonder what the fuss is all about in India. And so the reason is that in India, the political use of the Aryan Invasion Theory has continued uninterrupted. And so the missionaries, the Ambedkarites, the Dravidianists have simply continued to use it. And so that explains also why in the 90s, when the Out of India theory was being revived, it received such an enthusiastic welcome from the Hindu nationalists, because it countered the dominant narrative that was hurting Indian unity, that was supporting different separatisms. So in India, it keeps on playing that political role. You have recent statements by Mallikarjuna Kharge, the Congress leader, or by Rahul Gandhi, that support, that build on this Aryan invasion scenario. So it's still very much alive. It still needs to be countered here. So in this case, a purely scholarly finding now supporting an out of India scenario suddenly becomes overlaid with political implications, which they need not have. Suppose that the Indian population was really the result of an invasion, 4,000 years ago. Well, so what? And Savarkar, for example, Veer Savarkar, grudgingly accepted the Aryan invasion out of respect for prestigious European scholarship at that time. And yet, he didn't see this as problematic, because after all, a nation is formed over the centuries, and 4,000 years is more than long enough. Americans are very nationalistic, and yet America as a nation is only a few centuries old. So what's the fuss about? It's not the Hindu nationalists who are saying anything crazy by applauding the out of India scenario. It is the Aryan invasionists who are really bizarre by shouting that people who have come in India only 4,000 years ago are not really Indians. Mallikarjuna Kharge, who said in Parliament, "You Aryans don't belong in India." Now, what nonsense is this?
All right, I guess we have to take a few more questions, so yeah.
Hello, yeah.
And can we make sure that, because we have two questions, so we can keep the answers very short?
Yeah, my question is to Dr. Elst, and the question is that we found the Harappan script long back, and I'm just trying to ask if we've been able to decipher the script, because we were able to, as in the Orientalists were making some claims that it is either the Tamil or the Dravidian, Proto-Dravidian script, or another claim that I heard was that it was written right to left and not left to right, like the other scripts in India are.
Yes.
So is there any consensus on that?
Certainly not, though there are a few interesting new attempts at decipherment. Like there is this one by Yajnia Devam that has method. Most of the decipherment attempts are have no method, are just inspired, are intuitive and don't really go anywhere. This one looks more serious. It also has a lot of mathematics, decoding, deciphering behind it. it looks more serious, but I mean, it needs more analysis. But so far, this is undeciphered. What we can guess, reasonably well is that there were different languages spoken in the Harappan area. Probably Dravidian was spoken along the coast of Gujarat or Maharashtra. But in Punjab, Haryana, so it was Sanskrit. And so reasonably, you can guess that most of the inscriptions represent Sanskrit. But, again, I really don't want to commit myself to one theory as yet. But I am relatively optimistic that I'll still live to see the decipherment. I think it's around the corner.
All right, next question.
Good afternoon, panelists. My question is to Niraj, sir. Sir, that recent haplogroup analysis of the males and females that was done across South Asia, that gave an inclination towards the idea of out-of-India theory rather than Aryan migration or Aryan invasion theory. And the same has been supported by people like Abhijit Chavda, sir. So what are your views on the haplogroup analysis and why the West scholars, specifically people like Audrey Trishke and all, they deny the out of India or the cancellation of Aryan invasion theory rather than supporting it?
Yeah, because the out of India theory we have proposed just few years back. So it's very young. So I think not much people will support it. But yes, we have genetic evidences that proves that it's not out of India migrations, but we have found Indians in Turkmenistan and Iran, okay, about 5,000 years ago. It could be a case of trading, but they were buried in a proper way, it was a proper Harappan burial. A lot of also rituals evidences also were found while excavation. Coming back to mitochondrial DNA and Y chromosomal DNA haplogroup analysis. So we have a lot of haplogroup variations within India. Within India, we are not finding any differences between groups. Like the haplogroup patterns are unique and common within different groups of populations. For example, if you go back to, if you're talking to a population group in North India, for example, Eastern Uttar Pradesh, we are not finding any difference between different population groups or like different caste groups. The frequency pattern of different haplogroup is very common and very uniform within different groups. Few haplogroups also we are finding in Mesopotamia. For example, M3 haplogroup. It is also found in Mesopotamia, and that makes a case of out of India migration about 4,500 years before present. So there are like evidences, but we have not proposed so far like a big case about this out of India migration theory. We are not working in this direction to prove or disprove any hypothesis. We are just producing data, and we are giving our statement on the basis of data. So we are saying that we have found this many haplogroups or this many samples in Mesopotamia, in Syria, in Turkmenistan, but we can't propose a hypothesis on that.
Thank you, sir.
You want to say?
We have one more question, I guess. Yeah, make it quick.
Yeah, namaskara. My name is Jitu Mohan Sharnai, and my question is to Koenraad SG. It's regarding the Haravaidi river, that is, they are referring to as Helmand River, which is they are saying it's essentially Saraswati and it's not in India and all. So, what do you have to tell more about that?
Dr. Elst, I think he's talking about the Helmand Afghanistan hypothesis by Witzel.
Well, the Helmand is the Haravaiti in Persian, and so that's simply a repeat of the same name that it had in India. This happens a lot. Like you have New York in America named after York in England. It's a normal procedure. So you have this repeat of the same name many times. Like the Sarayu exists at 3 different places. For example, the Rasa is the name of the Amudarya, but later becomes the name of the Volga River in Russia, even. So this is a normal thing. And no, there is no reason to say, the one in Afghanistan was the original one. You know, this is also shown by archaeology. There is a clear gradient with Haryana, the Saraswati River, as the original center, like it is there that you find the city of Bhirana, which is one of the oldest archaeological sites, thousands of years older than the Harappan urban period. And so, you know, all these cities in Afghanistan and Central Asia and so on come much later. So you see, there is a very serious indication that India is the origin and Afghanistan is the imitation, not the other way around.
All right, I guess this was a very interesting session. Let's just end on this note. We're not going to find any answers any soon, and this is going to go on, so I'll hand it over to you.